All right, hello everyone. Just to let you all know, my microphone stand broke yesterday, right after the stream that we did yesterday. So it is going to be in frame. I mean, it was yesterday too, but that was not on purpose. But today I don't have any other choice. Because the mechanism that basically extends, because it's like two tubes in one, and then the thing that allows you to have the other tube come out and stay on top is broken. So anytime you pull the second tube out, it just falls back in. And we were gonna fix it today, and then I just totally forgot to ask my husband to help me fix it. So it has not been fixed. So this is what we're dealing with, but it could be worse. It could be the actual mic that's broken, but it's not, just the stand. So should still be okay, but let me know. I don't know if you're really upset about the stand. I don't know. There's nothing I can do about it. Duct tape, that is a good idea. I don't think that we have duct tape in the house. These are the things that happen when you move. There's just all these like little hardware things and little like just odds and ends that you just lose or use up in the process of moving, and then you just don't get more. Yeah, duct tape holds everything together. Yeah, when I was in high school, oh geez, now I'm gonna date myself. When I was in high school, that was sort of at the height of the everything made out of duct tape phase that the world went through. The stand was the heart and soul of these streams. I don't know how we're gonna, keep it together here. But when I was in high school, that was at the peak of the make everything out of duct tape thing that, like, the US went through. And so I had, like, a duct tape wallet. I covered my planner, my like school planner in duct tape. And not just like, covering it in duct tape, but it was in a like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a crosshatch kind of pattern. I made duct tape roses, and especially like pens and pencils, I would make the ends like roses, where it was like rose petals made of duct tape. I never did a duct tape prom dress, but I was always very jealous of the people who did do that, though I can imagine it would be very uncomfortable, it would be very hot, and probably very smelly, because duct tape does not smell very good, as someone who has spent a lot of time around duct tape. I went to prom in a suit made of duct tape. I am incredibly impressed. I can imagine it was probably very uncomfortable. Duct tape was my thing in high school. Yes, we are the same soul. All right. Amazon wishlist, add duct tape. Yeah, I was really into the like super cool colored duct tape, like purple duct tape. Most of my things were purple. I had this like sort of fuchsia color, like a purple pink, sort of like the, let's see, it's on this side, yes, like this color kind of duct tape. Oh geez, it's so hard when things are backwards. Okay. All right. Well, now that we have that out of the way, let's get into some Coraline, shall we? Genuinely colored duct tape is amazing. I have several rolls in neon colors. Yeah, the like neon pinks, the neon greens. I think I had a yellow one. None of this silver or white. That's boring. Give me all of the funky colors. Alright, so let's, real quick before I actually start reading, let's recap the first two nights of reading that we've done. So the first night, which was the first 3 chapters, we met Coraline, who is a I don't know, 11-year-old, I think. I'm not sure that we decided how old she actually is. Young-ish girl, and her family moves into a house that is sort of like a duplex style thing where there's multiple families living in the same house. And the house is divided up into apartments, or flats if you're British. And so she's unhappy because she just lives in this house with a bunch of old people, and her parents don't listen to her, and everything is weird and old and kind of creepy, and she really likes to explore, but her parents always tell her, no, you're not allowed to explore. And so one day while she's exploring, she opens a door in their drawing room, and it leads to nothing. It opens up onto a brick wall. And she's like, okay, that's weird, but whatever. And then later, she opens up the door again, and it leads into a hallway. A hallway that looks eerily similar to the hallway in her own apartment. And she follows it down, and it leads to a sort of mirror dimension, a world that is eerily similar to the one that she lives in, but some things are off. For instance, her other parents in this other world seem to be much more friendly, much more, oh, let's play, let's, have all these treats and we'll cook you good dinner. But also they have button eyes, and they want to keep Coraline in their world forever. So she's not super excited about this. And so she leaves and goes back into her world. But then she realizes that her parents are missing. And she doesn't know where they went. And this cat that she's been hanging out with leads her to a mirror. And in this mirror, she sees not only her own reflection, but the reflection of her parents. And her mom writes in the fog of the mirror, "Help us." And so she realizes, oh, my parents are trapped. I need to go save them. So she decides to go back into this mirror dimension, pull all of the bravery that she has, go back in there, and save her parents. But when she gets there, the other mother traps her there, locks the door from the other side, isn't gonna let her go back home, and it seems like she is holding the parents hostage. Who knows what she's gonna do with them. So Coraline is currently trapped in the house, and where we left off, she had been chatting with the other mother, and the other mother did not like how Coraline was talking to her, so she put her in timeout, and her timeout is how to even explain it? She was shoved into a mirror, essentially, like a little mirror prison. And so that is where Coraline is right now, being punished by the other mother in solitary confinement, essentially. And that is where we will pick up. Let me get a drink real quick. Alrighty. So this is chapter 7. And let me know if the sound levels are alright. And I can fix them. But we are going to begin. Somewhere inside her, Coraline could feel a huge sob welling up. And then she stopped it before it came out. She took a deep breath and let it go. She put out her hands to touch the space in which she was imprisoned. It was the size of a broom closet, tall enough to stand in or sit in, not wide or deep enough to lie down in. One wall was glass, and it felt cold to the touch. She went around the tiny room a second time, running her hands over every surface that she could reach, feeling for doorknobs or switches or concealed catches, some kind of way out, and found nothing. A spider scuttled over the back of her hand, and she choked back a shriek. But apart from the spider, she was alone in the closet in the pitch dark. And then her hand touched something that felt for all the world like somebody's cheek and lips, small and cold, and a voice whispered in her ear, "Hush and shush! Say nothing, for the bedlam might be listening." Coraline said nothing. Here we have our art. She felt a cold hand touch her face, fingers running over it like a gentle beat of a moth's wings. Another voice, hesitant and so faint Coraline wondered if she were imagining it, said, art thou alive?" "Yes," whispered Coraline. "Oh, poor child," said the first voice. "Who are you?" whispered Coraline. "Names, names, names," said another voice, all far away and lost. "The names are the first things to go. After the breath is gone and the beating of the heart, we keep our memories longer than our names. I still keep pictures in my mind of my governess on some May morning, carrying my hoop and stick, and the morning sun behind her, and all the tulips bobbing in the breeze. But I've forgotten the name of my governess, and of the tulips too." "I don't think tulips have names," said Coraline. "They're just tulips." "Perhaps," said the voice sadly. "But I've always thought that these tulips must have had names. They were red and orange and red and orange and yellow, like the embers in the nursery fire of a winter's evening. I remember them." The voice sounded so sad that Coraline put out a hand to the place where the voice was coming from, and she found a cold hand, and she squeezed it tightly. Her eyes were beginning to get used to the darkness. Now Coraline saw, or imagined she saw, 3 shapes, each as faint and pale as the moon in the daytime sky. They were the shapes of children about her own size. The cold hand squeezed her hand back. "Thank you," said the voice. "Are you a girl?" asked Coraline, "or a boy?" There was a pause. "When I was small, I wore skirts, and my hair was long and curled," it said doubtfully. "But now that you ask, it does seem to me that one day they took my skirts and gave me breeches and cut my hair." "'Tain't something we give mind to," said the first of the voices. "A boy, perhaps, then," continued the one whose hand she was holding. "I believe I was once a boy." And it glowed a little more brightly in the darkness of the room behind the mirror. "What happened to you all?" asked Coraline. "How did you come here?" "She left us here," said one of the voices. "She stole our hearts, and she stole our souls, and she took our lives away, and she left us here and forgot us in the dark." "Oh, you poor things," said Coraline. "How long have you been here?" "So very long a time," said a voice. "Aye, time beyond reckoning," said another voice. "I walked through the scullery door," said the voice of one that she thought might be a boy, "and I found myself back in the parlor, but she was waiting for me. She told me she was my other mamma, but I never saw my true mamma again." "Flee," said the very first of the voices, another girl, Coraline fancied. "Flee while there's still air in your lungs and blood in your veins and warmth in your heart. Flee while you still have your mind and your soul." "I'm not running away," said Coraline. "She has my parents. I came to get them back." "Ah, but she'll keep you here while the days turn to dust and the leaves fall and the years pass one after the next like a tick, tick, ticking of a clock." "No," said Coraline, "she won't." There was silence then in the room behind the mirror. "Peradventure," said a voice in the darkness, "if you could win your mamma and your papa back from the bedlam, you could also free our souls." "Has she taken them?" asked Coraline, shocked. "Aye, and hidden them. This is why we could not leave here when we died. She kept us, she fed on us, until now we've nothing left of ourselves, only snakeskins and spider husks. Find our secret hearts, young mistress." "And what will happen to you if I do?" asked Coraline. The voices said nothing. "And what is she going to do to me?" she asked. The pale figures pulsed faintly, and she could imagine that they were nothing more than after images, like the glow left by a bright light in your eyes after the lights go out. "It doth not hurt," whispered one faint voice. "She will take your life and all that you are and all that you carest for, and she will leave you with nothing but mist and fog. She'll take your joy, and one day you'll awake and your heart and your soul will have gone. A husk you'll be, a wisp you'll be, and a thing no more than a dream on waking, or a memory of something forgotten. Hollow, whispered the third voice. Hollow, hollow, hollow. You must flee, sighed a voice faintly. I don't think so, said Coraline. I tried running away and it didn't work. She just took my parents. Can you tell me how to get out of this room? If we knew, then we could tell you. Poor things, said Coraline to herself. She sat down. She took off her sweater and rolled it up and put it behind her head as a pillow. She won't keep me in the dark forever, said Coraline. She brought me here to play games. Games and challenges, the cat said. I'm not much of a challenge here in the dark. She tried to get comfortable, twisting and bending herself to fit the cramped space behind the mirror. Her stomach rumbled. She ate her last apple, taking the tiniest bites, making it last as long as she could. When she had finished, she was still hungry. Then an idea struck her, and she whispered, When she comes to let me out, why don't you three come with me? We wish that we could, they sighed to her in their barely there voices. But she has our hearts in her keeping. Now we belong to the dark and to the empty places. The light would shrivel us and burn. Oh, said Coraline. She closed her eyes, which made the darkness darker, and she rested her head on the rolled-up sweater, and she went to sleep. And as she fell asleep, she thought she felt a ghost kiss her cheek, tenderly, and a small voice whisper into her ear, a voice so faint it was barely there at all, a gentle, wispy nothing of a voice, so hushed that Coraline could almost believe she was imagining it. Look through the stone, it said to her. And then she slept. This is the image that we get for the next chapter. If I can figure it, there we go. It is a mess on a child's bedroom floor. Alright, we are just going to go straight on to chapter 8, and then we will take a break when chapter 8 is done. So, chapter 8. The other mother looked healthier than before. There was a little blush to her cheeks, and her hair was wriggling like lazy snakes on a warm day. Her black button eyes seemed as if they had been freshly polished. She had pushed through the mirror as if she were walking through nothing more solid than water, and had stared down at Coraline. Then she had opened up the door with the little silver key. She picked Coraline up just as Coraline's real mother had when Coraline was much younger, cradling the half-sleeping child as if she were a baby. The other mother carried Coraline into the kitchen and put her down very gently upon the countertop. Coraline struggled to wake herself up, conscious only for the moment of having been cuddled and loved, and wanting more of it, and then realizing where she was and who she was with. There, my sweet Coraline, said her other mother. I came and fetched you out of the cupboard. You needed to be taught a lesson, but we temper our justice with mercy here. We love the sinner, and we hate the sin. Now if you will be a good child who loves her mother, be compliant and fair-spoken, you and I shall understand each other perfectly, and we shall love each other perfectly as well. Coraline scratched the sleep grit from her eyes. There were other children in there, she said. Old ones from a long time ago. Were there? Said the other mother. She was bustling between pans in the fridge, bringing out eggs and cheeses, butter, and a slab of sliced pink bacon. Yes, said Coraline, there were, and I think you're planning to turn me into one of them, a dead shell. The other mother smiled gently. With one hand she cracked the eggs into a bowl, with the other she whisked them and whirled them. Then she dropped a pat of butter into a frying pan where it hissed and fizzled and spun as she sliced thin slices of cheese. She poured the melted butter and the cheese into the egg mixture and whisked it some more. Now I think you're being silly, dear, said the other mother. I love you. I will always love you. Nobody sensible believes in ghosts anyway. That's because they're all such liars. Oh, smell the lovely breakfast I'm making for you. She poured the yellow mixture into the pan. Cheese omelet, your favorite. Coraline's mouth watered. You like games, she said. That's what I've been told. The other mother's black eyes flashed. Oh, everybody likes games. Yes, said Coraline. She climbed down from the counter and sat at the table. The bacon was sizzling and spitting under the grill. It smelled wonderful. Wouldn't you be happy if you won me fair and square? Asked Coraline. Possibly, said the other mother. She had a show of unconcernedness, but her fingers twitched and drummed, and she licked her lips with her scarlet tongue. What exactly are you offering? Me, said Coraline, and she gripped her knees under the table to stop them from shaking. If I lose, I'll stay here with you forever, and I'll let you love me. I'll be a most dutiful daughter. I'll eat your food and play happy families, and I'll let you sew buttons into my eyes. The other mother stared at her, black buttons unblinking. That sounds very fine, she said. And if you do not lose, then you let me go. You let everyone go. My real father and mother, the dead children, everyone you've trapped here. The other mother took the bacon from under the grill and put it on a plate. Then she slipped the cheese omelet from the pan onto the plate, flipping it as she did so, letting it fold itself into a perfect omelet shape. She placed the breakfast plate in front of Coraline, along with a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice and a mug of frothy hot chocolate. Yes, she said, I think I like this game. But what kind of game shall it be? A riddle game? A test of knowledge or skill? An exploring game, suggested Coraline. A finding things game. And what is it you think you should be finding in this hide-and-go-seek game, Coraline Jones? Coraline hesitated. Then, my parents, said Coraline, and the souls of the children behind the mirror. The other mother smiled at this triumphantly, and Coraline wondered if she had made the right choice. Still, it was too late to change her mind now. A deal, said the other mother. Now eat up your breakfast, my sweet. Oh, don't worry, it won't hurt you. Coraline stared at the breakfast, hating herself for giving in so easily, but she was starving. How do I know you'll keep your word? Asked Coraline. I swear it, said the other mother. I swear it on my own mother's grave. Does she have a grave? Asked Coraline. Oh, yes, said the other mother. I put her in there myself, and when I found her trying to crawl out, I put her back in. Swear on something else, so I can trust you to keep your word. My right hand, said the other mother, holding it up. She waggled the long fingers slowly, displaying the claw-like nails. I swear on that. Coraline shrugged. Okay, it's a deal. She ate the breakfast, trying not to wolf it down. She was hungrier than she had thought. As she ate, her other mother stared at her. It was hard to read expressions into those black button eyes, but Coraline thought that her other mother looked hungry too. She drank the orange juice, but even though she knew she would like it, she could not bring herself to taste the hot chocolate. Where should I start looking? Asked Coraline. Wherever you wish, said her other mother, as if she did not care at all. Coraline looked at her, and Coraline thought hard. There was no point, she decided, in exploring the garden and the grounds. They didn't exist, they weren't real. There was no abandoned tennis court in the other mother's world, no bottomless well. All that was real was the house itself. She looked around the kitchen. She opened the oven, peered into the freezer, poked into the salad compartment of the fridge. The other mother followed her around, looking at Coraline with a smirk, always hovering at the edge of her lips. How big are souls, anyway? Asked Coraline. The other mother sat down at the kitchen table and leaned back against the wall, saying nothing. She picked at her teeth with a long crimson-varnished fingernail. Then she tapped the finger gently, tap, 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 against the polished black surface of her black button eyes. Fine, said Coraline, don't tell me. I don't care. It doesn't matter if you help me or not. Everyone knows that the soul is the same size as a beach ball. She was hoping the other mother would say something like, oh, nonsense, they're the size of ripe onions, or suitcases, or grandfather clocks. But the other mother simply smiled, and the tap, tap, tapping of her fingernail against the eye was as steady and relentless as the drip of water droplets from the faucet into the sink. And then, Coraline realized, it was simply the noise of water, and she was alone in the room. Coraline shivered. She preferred the other mother to have a location. If she were nowhere, then she could be anywhere. And, after all, it is always easier to be afraid of something you cannot see. She put her hands into her pockets, and her fingers closed around the reassuring shape of the stone with a hole in it. She pulled it out of her pocket, held it in front of her as if she were holding a gun, and walked out into the hall. There was no sound but the tap-tap of the water dripping into the metal sink. She glanced at the mirror at the end of the hall. For a moment it clouded over, and it seemed to her that faces swam in the glass, indistinct and shapeless. And then the faces were gone, and there was nothing in the mirror but a girl who was small for her age, holding something that glowed gently like green coal. Coraline looked down at her hand, surprised. It was just a stone with a hole in it, a nondescript brown pebble. Then she looked back into the mirror where the stone glimmered like an emerald. A trail of green fire blew from the pebble in the mirror and drifted toward Coraline's bedroom. Said Coraline. She walked into the bedroom. The toys fluttered excitedly as she walked in, as if they were pleased to see her, and a little tank rolled out of the toy box to greet her, its tread rolling over several other toys. It fell from the toy box onto the floor, tipping as it fell, and it lay on the carpet like a beetle on its back, grumbling and grinding its treads before Coraline picked it up and turned it over. The tank fled under the bed in embarrassment. Coraline looked around the room. She looked in the cupboards and the drawers. Then she picked up one end of the toy box and tipped all the toys out onto the carpet, where they grumbled and stretched and wiggled awkwardly free of each other. A gray marble rolled across the floor and clicked against the wall. None of the toys looked particularly soul-like, she thought. She picked up and examined a silver charm bracelet, from which hung tiny animal charms that chased each other around the perimeter of the bracelet, the fox never catching the rabbit, the bear never gaining on the fox. Coraline opened her hand and looked at the stone with a hole in it, hoping for a clue but not finding one. Most of the toys that had been in the toy box had now crawled away to hide under the bed, and the few toys that were left, a green plastic soldier, a glass marble, a vivid pink yo-yo, and such, were the kinds of things you would find in the bottom of toy boxes in the real world, forgotten objects, abandoned and unloved. She was about to leave and look elsewhere, and then she remembered a voice in the darkness, a gentle whispering voice, and what it had told her to do. She raised the stone with a hole in it and held it in front of her right eye. She closed her left eye and looked at the room through the hole in the stone. Through the stone, the world was gray and colorless, like a pencil drawing. Everything in it was gray. No, not quite everything. Something glinted on the floor, something the color of an ember in a nursery fireplace, the color of a scarlet and orange tulip nodding in the May sun. Coraline reached out her left hand, scared that if she took her eye off, it would vanish, and she fumbled for the burning thing. Her fingers closed about something smooth and cool. She snatched it up, and then lowered the stone with a hole in it from her eye and looked down. The gray glass marble from the bottom of the toy box sat dully in the pink palm of her hand. She raised the stone to her eye once more and looked through it at the marble. Once again the marble burned and flickered with a red fire. A voice whispered in her mind. "Indeed, lady, it comes to me I certainly was a boy, now I do think on it. Oh, but you must hurry. There are still 2 of us to find, and the beldam is already angry with you for uncovering me." If I'm going to do this, thought Coraline, I'm not going to do it in her clothes. She changed back into her pajamas and dressing gown and slippers, leaving the gray sweater and the black jeans neatly folded up on the bed, the orange boots on the floor by the toy box. She put the marble into her dressing gown pocket and walked out into the hall. Something stung her face and hands like sand blowing on a beach on a windy day. She covered her eyes and pushed forward. The sand stings got worse, and it got harder and harder to walk, as if she were pushing into the wind on a particularly blustery day. It was a vicious wind, and a cold one. She took a step backward, the way she had come. "Oh, keep going," whispered a ghost voice in her ear, "for the bedlam is angry." She stepped forward into the hallway, into another gust of wind, which stung her cheeks and face with invisible sand, sharp as needles, sharp as glass. "Play fair," shouted Coraline into the wind. There was no reply, but the wind whipped about her one more time, petulantly, and then it dropped away and was gone. As she passed the kitchen, Coraline could hear in the sudden silence the drip, drip of the water from the leaking tap, or perhaps the other mother's long fingernails tapping impatiently against the table. Coraline resisted the urge to look. In a couple of strides, she reached the front door and walked outside. Coraline went down the steps and around the house until she reached the other Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's flat. The lamps around the door were flickering on and off, almost randomly now, spelling out no words that Coraline could understand. The door was closed. She was afraid it was locked, and she pushed on it with all her strength. First, it stuck, and then suddenly it gave, and with a jerk, Coraline stumbled into the dark room beyond. Coraline closed one hand around the stone with a hole in it and walked forward into the blackness. She expected to find a curtained anteroom, but there was nothing there. The room was dark. The theater was empty. She moved ahead cautiously. Something rustled above her. She looked up into a deeper darkness, and as she did so, her feet knocked against something. She reached down, picked up a flashlight, and clicked it on, sweeping the beam around the room. The theater was derelict and abandoned. Chairs were broken on the floor, and old, dusty spiderwebs draped the walls and hung from the rotten wood and the decomposing velvet hangings. Something rustled once again. Coraline directed her light beam upward toward the ceiling. There were things up there, hairless, jellyfish. She thought they might once have had faces, might even once have been dogs, but no dogs had wings like bats or could hang like spiders, like bats, upside down. The light startled the creatures, and one of them took to the air, its wings whirring heavily through the dust. Coraline ducked as it swooped close to her. It came to rest on a far wall and began to clamber upside down back to the nest of the dog bats upon the ceiling. Coraline raised the stone to her eye and scanned the room through it, looking for something that glowed or glinted, a telltale sign that somewhere in this room was another hidden soul. She ran the beam of the flashlight about the room as she searched, the thick dust in the air making the light beam seem almost solid. There was something upon the back wall behind the ruined stage. It was grayish-white, twice the size of Coraline herself, and it was stuck to the back wall like a slug. Coraline took a deep breath. "I'm not afraid," she told herself. "I'm not." She did not believe herself, but she scrambled up onto the old stage, fingers sinking into the rotting wood as she pulled herself up. As she got closer to the thing on the wall, she saw it was some kind of sack, like a spider's egg case. It twitched in the light beam. Inside the sack was something that looked like a person, but a person with two heads, with twice as many arms and legs as it should have. The creature in the sack seemed horribly unformed and unfinished, as if two plasticine people had been warmed and rolled together, squashed and pressed into one thing. Coraline hesitated. She did not want to approach the thing. The dog bats dropped one by one from the ceiling and began to circle the room, coming close to her but never touching her. "Perhaps there are no souls hidden in here," she thought. "Perhaps I can just leave and go somewhere else." She took a last look through the hole in the stone. The abandoned theater was still a bleak gray, but now there was a brown glow, as rich and bright as polished cherry wood, coming from inside the sack. Whatever was glowing was being held in one of the hands of the thing on the wall. Coraline walked slowly across the damp stage, trying to make as little noise as she could, afraid that if she disturbed the thing in the sack, it would open its eyes and see her, and then... But there was nothing that she could think of as scary as having it look at her. Her heart pounded in her chest. She took another step forward. She had never been so scared, but still she walked forward until she reached the sack. Then she pushed her hand into the sticky, clinging whiteness of the stuff on the wall. It crackled softly, like a tiny fire, as she pushed, and it clung to her skin and clothes like a spiderweb clings, like white cotton candy. She pushed her hand into it, and she reached upward until she touched a cold hand, which was, she could feel, closed around another glass marble. The creature's skin felt slippery, as if it had been covered in jelly. Coraline tugged at the marble. At first, nothing happened. It was held tight in the creature's grasp. Then, one by one, the fingers loosened their grip, and the marble slipped into her hand. She pulled her arm back through the sticky webbing revealed that the thing's eyes had not opened. She shone the light on its faces. They resembled, she decided, the younger versions of Miss Spink and Miss Forcible, but twisted and squeezed together, like two lumps of wax that had melted and melded together into one ghastly thing. Without warning, one of the creature's hands made a grab for Coraline's arm. Its fingernails scraped her skin, but it was too slippery to grip, and Coraline pulled away successfully. And then the eyes opened, 4 black buttons glinting and staring down at her, and 2 voices that sounded like no voices Coraline had ever heard. They began to speak to her. One of them wailed and whispered, the other buzzed like a fat and angry bluebottle at a window pane, but the voices said as one person, "Thief! Give it back! Stop! Thief!" The air became alive with dog bats. Coraline began to back away. She realized then that, terrifying though the thing on the wall had once been, it was attached to the wall by its web, encased in its cocoon. It could not follow her. The dog bats flapped and fluttered about her, but they did nothing to hurt Coraline. She climbed down from the stage, shone the flashlight about the old theater, looking for the way out. "Flee, miss!" wailed a girl's voice in her head. "Flee now! You have 2 of us! Flee this place while your blood still flows!" Coraline dropped the marble into her pocket beside the other. She spotted the door, ran to it, and pulled on it until it opened. And that is the end of that exhilarating chapter. We have another wonderful piece of art here of the other mother swallowing a key, it seems. So we have that to look forward to in just a moment. Ugh. Was there perfectly timed background music change? Wonderful. I just have like a playlist that goes on in the background, so it's all kind of luck and chance as to when things change. Ugh. I ate dinner right before doing this, and so my mouth is like weirdly dry, so I keep stumbling over my words. So I apologize for that. What a... what's the word I'm looking for? Adrenaline pumping chapter. So I haven't read this since I was a child. Like, it's been a while since I've read this. And like I mentioned before, I read it pretty much all in one sitting. And so it all sort of like melds together in my head. But I remember at the end it did feel sort of like I was reading at like a fever pitch, and it was very much speed reading to the end, because it was just so much energy all at once. And yeah, I definitely feel that. And now it has been a few years since I've seen the film. And I think I will watch it again sometime in October as, you know, Halloween celebration. But is this... it seems to be pretty in line with the book. Like, there are some things that I think are different. Like, I think there's a boy in it. Like, there's a neighbor boy or something that she's sort of friends with. But otherwise, I think it matches pretty much 1-to-1. And, like, I remember the movie being creepy, but not necessarily this creepy. But maybe I'm just misremembering, and the film actually isn't, or is creepier than I remember. I ask myself that every day. Yeah. Alright, well, So let's see, we have chapter 9, which is pretty short, and then chapter 10. I might just read both of these back to back, because it seems like, I don't know, I don't want the like high energy to be lost. So I think I might just... They added the voice so Coraline wouldn't have to talk to herself. I want to believe you, but I also feel like it's sort of like a Hollywood thing where they have to add, you know, not necessarily like love interest, but a like foil, I guess, for characters. But I do think from like a narrative perspective that it does make sense to have someone else there. Because with a lot of books, when you're adapting books to the screen, that's one of those things that you have to always think about. Like, you know, especially if a book is in first person, which this one isn't. But with first person books and you have a lot of like internal monologue and stuff, like how do you show that on film? And so that's something that you have to consider when you're doing that kind of adaptation. And so adding in other characters or having the main character speak aloud those thoughts is one way to get around that. So, oh, that's what the director said. Then perfect, yeah. Then you are correct, and my pessimistic idea is not. So thank you for correcting me on that. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember like not liking the boy. It just seemed, I don't know, unnecessary. But now, in retrospect, seems good that they did that, because then we get to see more inside her brain. Alright, I will stop rambling and continue on with chapter 9. I don't know how to hold the book. There we go. Outside, the world had become a formless, swirling mist with no shapes or shadows behind it, while the house itself seemed to have twisted and stretched. It seemed to Coraline that it was crouching and staring down at her, as if it were not really a house, but only the idea of a house, and the person who had had the idea, she was certain, was not a good person. There was a sticky web of stuff clinging to her arm, and she wiped it off as best she could. The gray windows of the house slanted at strange angles. The other mother was waiting for her, standing on the grass with her arms folded. Her black button eyes were expressionless, but her lips were pressed tightly together in cold fury. When she saw Coraline, she reached out one long white hand, and she crooked a finger. Coraline walked toward her. The other mother said nothing. "I got 2, said Coraline. "One soul still to go." The expression on the other mother's face did not change. She might not have heard what Coraline said. "Well, I just thought you'd want to know," said Coraline. "Thank you, Coraline," said the other mother coldly, and her voice did not just come from her mouth. It came from the mist and the fog and the house and the sky. She said, "You know that I love you." And, despite herself, Coraline nodded. It was true. The other mother loved her. But she loved Coraline as a miser loves money or a dragon loves its gold. In the other mother's button eyes, Coraline knew she was a possession, nothing more, a tolerated pet whose behavior was no longer amusing. "I don't want your love," said Coraline. "I don't want anything from you." "Not even a helping hand?" asked the other mother. "You've been doing so well after all. I thought you might want a little hint to help you with the rest of your treasure hunt." "I'm doing fine on my own," said Coraline. "Yes," said the other mother, "but if you wanted to get into the flat in the front, the empty one, to look around, you would find the door locked, and then where would you be?" "Oh," Coraline pondered this for a moment. Then she said, "Is there a key?" The other mother stood there in the paper-gray fog of the fluttering world. Her black hair drifted about her head as if it had a mind and a purpose of its own. She coughed suddenly in the back of her throat, and then she opened her mouth. The other mother reached up her hand and removed a small brass front door key from her tongue. "Here," she said. "You'll need this to get in." She tossed the key casually toward Coraline, who caught it one-handed before she could think about whether she wanted it or not. The key was still slightly damp. A chill wind blew about them, and Coraline shivered and looked away. When she looked back, she was alone. Uncertainly, she walked around to the front of the house and stood in front of the door to the empty flat. Like all the doors, it was painted bright green. "She does not mean you well," whispered a ghost voice in her ear. "We do not believe that she would help you. It must be a trick." Coraline said, "Yes, you're right, I expect." Then she put the key in the lock and turned it. Silently, the door swung open, and silently, Coraline walked inside. The flat had walls the color of old milk. The wooden boards of the floor were uncarpeted and dusty with the marks and patterns of old carpets and rugs on them. There was no furniture in here, only places where furniture had once been. Nothing decorated the walls. There were discolored rectangles on the walls to show where paintings or photographs had once hung. It was so silent that Coraline imagined that she could hear the motes of dust drifting through the air. She found herself to be quite worried that something would jump out at her, so she began to whistle. She thought it might make it harder for things to jump out at her if she was whistling. First, she walked through the empty kitchen. Then she walked through an empty bathroom containing only a cast-iron bath, and in the bath, a dead spider the size of a small cat. The last room she looked at had, she supposed, once been a bedroom. She could imagine that the rectangular dust shadow on the floorboards had once been a bed. Then she saw something and smiled grimly. Set into the floorboards was a large metal ring. Coraline knelt and took the cold ring in her hands, and she tugged it upward as hard as she could. Terribly slowly, stiffly, heavily, a hinged square of floor lifted. It was a trapdoor. It lifted, and through the opening, Coraline could see only darkness. She reached down, and her hand found a cold switch. She flicked it, without much hope that it would work, but somewhere below her a bulb lit, and a thin yellow light came up from the hole in the floor. She could see steps heading down, but nothing else. Coraline put her hand into her pocket and took out the stone with a hole in it. She looked through it at the cellar, but saw nothing. She put the stone back into her pocket. Up through the hole came the smell of damp clay and something else, an acrid tang like sour vinegar. Coraline let herself down into the hole, looking nervously at the trapdoor. It was so heavy that if it fell, she was sure she would be trapped down in the darkness forever. She put a hand up and touched it, but it stayed in position. And then she turned toward the darkness below, and she walked down the steps. Set into the wall at the bottom of the steps was another light switch, metal and rusting. She pushed it until it clicked down, and a naked bulb hanging from a wire from the low ceiling came on. It did not give up enough light even for Coraline to make out the things that had been painted onto the flaking cellar walls. The paintings seemed crude. There were eyes, she could see that, and things that might have been grapes, and other things below them. Coraline could not be sure that they were paintings of people. There was a pile of rubbish in one corner of the room, cardboard boxes filled with mildewed papers and decaying curtains in a heap beside them. Coraline's slippers crunched across the cement floor. The bad smell was worse now. She was ready to turn and leave when she saw the foot sticking out from beneath the pile of curtains. She took a deep breath. The smells of sour wine and moldy bread filled her head, and she pulled away the damp cloth to reveal something more or less the size and shape of a person. In that dim light, it took her several seconds to recognize it for what it was. The thing was pale and swollen like a grub, with thin, stick-like arms and feet. It held almost no features on its face, which had puffed and swollen like rising bread dough. The thing had 2 large black buttons where its eyes should have been. Coraline made a noise, a sound of revulsion and horror, and, as if it had heard her and awakened, the thing began to sit up. Coraline stood there, frozen. The thing turned its head until both its black button eyes were pointed straight at her. A mouth opened in the mouthless face, strands of pale stuff sticking to the lips, and a voice that no longer even faintly resembled her father's whispered, "Coraline." "Well," said Coraline to the thing that had once been her other father, "at least you didn't jump on me." The creature's twig-like hands moved to its face and pushed the pale clay about, making something like a nose. It said nothing. "I'm looking for my parents," said Coraline, "or a stolen soul from one of the other children. Are they down here?" "There's nothing down here," said the pale thing indistinctly. "Nothing but dust and damp and forgetting." The thing was white and huge and swollen. Monstrous, thought Coraline, but also miserable. She raised the stone with the hole in it to her eye and looked through it. Nothing. The pale thing was telling her the truth. "Poor thing," she said. "I bet she made you come down here as a punishment for telling me too much." The thing hesitated, and then it nodded. Coraline wondered how she could ever have imagined that this grub-like thing resembled her father. "I'm so sorry," she said. "She's not best pleased," said the thing that was once the other father. "Not best pleased at all. You've put her quite out of sorts, and when she gets out of sorts, she takes it out on everybody else. It's her way." Coraline patted its hairless head. Its skin was tacky like warm bread dough. "Poor thing," she said. "You're just a thing she made and then threw away." The thing nodded vigorously. As it nodded, the left button eye fell off and clattered onto the concrete floor. The thing looked around vacantly with its one eye, as if it had lost her. Finally, it saw her, and, as if making a great effort, it opened its mouth once more and said in a wet, urgent voice, "Run, child. Leave this place. She wants me to hurt you, to keep you here forever, so that you can never finish the game and she'll win. She's pushing me so hard to hurt you. I cannot fight her." "You can," said Coraline. "Be brave." She looked around. The thing that had once been the other father was between her and the steps up and out of the cellar. She started edging along the wall, heading toward the steps. The thing twisted bonelessly until its one eye was again facing her. It seemed to be getting bigger now and more awake. "Alas," it said, "I cannot." And it lunged across the cellar toward her, then, its toothless mouth opened wide. Coraline had a single heartbeat in which to react. She could only think of two things to do. Either she could scream and try to run away, and be chased around a badly lit cellar by the huge grub thing, be chased until it caught her, or she could do something else. So she did something else. As the thing reached her, Coraline put out her hand and closed it around the thing's remaining button eye, and she tugged it as hard as she knew how. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the button came away and flew from her hand, clicking against the wall before it fell to the cellar floor. The thing froze in place. It threw its pale head back blindly and opened its mouth horribly wide, and it roared its anger and frustration. Then, all in a rush, the thing swept toward the place where Coraline had been standing. But Coraline was not standing there any longer. She was already tiptoeing as quietly as she could up the steps that would take her away from the dim cellar with the crude paintings on the wall. She could not take her eyes from the floor beneath her, though, across which the pale thing flopped and writhed, hunting for her. Then, as if it was being told what to do, the creature stopped moving, and its blind head tipped to one side. "It's listening for me," thought Coraline. "I must be extra quiet." She took another step up, and her foot slipped on the step, and the thing heard her. Its head tipped toward her. For a moment it swayed and seemed to be gathering its wits. Then, fast as a serpent, it slithered for the steps and began to flow up them toward her. Coraline turned and ran wildly up the last half-dozen steps, and she pushed herself up and onto the floor of the dusty bedroom. Without pausing, she pulled the heavy trapdoor toward her and let go of it. It crashed down with a thump just as something large banged against it. The trapdoor shook and rattled in the floor, but stayed where it was. Coraline took a deep breath. If there had been any furniture in that flat, even a chair, she would have pulled it onto the trapdoor. But there was nothing. She walked out of the flat as fast as she could, without ever actually running, and she locked the front door behind her. She left the door key under the mat, and then she walked down onto the drive. She had half expected that the other mother would be standing there waiting for Coraline to come out, but the world was silent and empty. Coraline wanted to go home. She hugged herself and told herself that she was brave, and she almost believed herself. And then she walked around to the side of the house, in the gray mist that wasn't a mist, and she made for the stairs to go up. Whew! What a chapter, folks. This is for children. This book is for children. Jeez Louise. Whew. So, question for you all. So far we have the other mother and the creepy, like Frankenstein's monster abomination of the two of Miss Spink and Miss Forcible. And we have the other father clay golem creature. That actually in this chapter reminded me a lot of No Face from Spirited Away, like at the end, after he's eaten everything and is just kind of running and like dripping and is just like slime essentially. That's sort of the vibe that I got from the other father thing. Of those three, I don't know which is the creepiest. I mean, I want to say the other father thing simply because it was the most, like, actively aggressive. It was one of those kind of, I don't know, like almost video game sort of levels of it's creepy and then it's suddenly very fast and chasing you. And you don't get that a lot in a lot of other... Well, I guess maybe you do. I don't know. I don't watch a ton of horror movies because I am a coward and am very easily freaked out by things. Let's see. The other mother, by far for me, she has intentions. And the other mother seems disturbingly manipulative. Yeah, like it's so interesting. I feel like you could almost, like, I don't know, like the other mother is very much the like psychological horror and, you know, the gaslighting and the manipulation and the like emotional abuse, whereas I think the other father is much more of like the jump scare sort of, you know, adrenaline, like you are being chased, you are actively being, you know, there is something aggressive coming at you, so it's that sort of fear. Whereas the Miss Spink, Miss Forcible creation, it's just freaky. Like, it's just weird. It's like body horror, kind of gross. So I think it would be interesting to do an analysis of this from a like horror perspective, because there is a lot of like literary analysis on like monsters and like monster fiction, so I wonder if looking at this through that lens, I don't know, I mean, I'm not trained in that. I never, like, I know people who study that kind of thing and who have done, you know, essays, and I know like other video essayists who have done things on that, but I would be really interested to hear what some of those people think. Gendered horror from the other parents is interesting. Oh yeah. I wonder. Yeah, there's so much interesting stuff here to think about and analyze. Maybe this will be my next Halloween video essay, is an analysis of Coraline. Though, honestly, I can do horror stuff outside of Halloween, like outside of October. So maybe this will be a November thing. Who knows? But there is a lot of really cool stuff here to think about. Yeah, I could go down that rabbit hole, but Neil Gaiman is a master of hidden themes. That is true. And all year is horror season. Yes. So I haven't read Sandman. Now, Sandman is his graphic novel series that he did, that is being turned into a TV show. That I think trailers are out. I haven't seen anything about them. I don't know anything about it. I haven't read it. I just know of it. But I know that something that Neil Gaiman does a lot of, and that he does really well, according to other people who have read more of his work than I have, is there's a lot of inclusivity as far as like LGBTQ and like trans and gender non-conforming people in his work. And that he's very, you know, that is something that he looks at and tackles in, from what I've heard, a very sort of respectful way. And so I wonder if, because one of the ghost children talks about that, and I wonder if there's, about gender, that is, and sort of gendered expectations and gender norms and stereotypes and things like that about how, you know, they wanted to do these things, but then they were given a haircut and given shorts and told you are a boy. And I wonder, I don't know, and I mean, I don't want to look too far into it, because, you know, especially in like the Victorian age, I mean, boys did wear different clothes, and boys, you know, children, I think, can express a lot of things in a lot of different ways and not have it necessarily be, you know, like a lot of young girls have very, very short hair that is not necessarily a like masculine expression of their gender, but I wonder if that is also something that could be looked at in here as far as a theme. Again, these are just thoughts. I'm not sure what to do with them yet, or if they even lead anywhere, but it's just interesting to think about and to pick out some of these things that are just question marks and kind of chew on them, think about them, and see where they go, if they go anywhere. And that is how I come up with ideas for video essays. There are cats on my shirt. That is correct. This is one of my... Is this my only sweater that has cats on it? I think it is. But yes, this is my very cozy sweater because I'm feeling very cozy today. Yeah, things aren't always as gender-coded at that age. That is correct. Changeling the Lost. Is that a game? Because that sounds really interesting. Just given that combination of words, that sounds really interesting. Okay, I need another drink because my mouth is getting dry, and then we will continue on with chapter 10 and see where we get from here. I will skip forward just to show you this wonderful little picture. I don't know how well you all can see that, if at all. But it is very cute. It is released by White Wolf about children who are abducted by the Fae and changed by them into something else. That sounds wonderful. Is it a like video game or like a tabletop game? Though you don't like horror movies slash TV much, I highly recommend The Haunting of Hill House. Best TV show I've ever seen, I think, but very scary. Tabletop RPG. You are speaking my language now. Eschatonic. A very nice screen name as well, by the way. I've heard The Haunting of Hill House is really good. I think my mom was telling me about it, that she watched it. She's also, like, not into scary things, so that kind of surprised me. She's also been getting really into, American Horror Story. Or, like, the new, anthology, American Horror Stories. Which, again, none of that. That is all, like, for me. But, yeah, like, I really like horror fiction. Like, you know, this and Lovecraft and, you know, Junji Ito and Jeff Vandermeer and things like that. But as soon as I have to see it, like, jump scares, too much. The music freaks me out. But reading it, when I can take a break and step away, and when I can only imagine things as horrible as I can imagine them, then it's all sort of within my own power. That makes it okay. But I have heard really good things about The Haunting of Hill House, so perhaps I can, I don't know, cuddle up with my cats, and they can protect me from the scares. Changeling Gnome, wonderful. This, yeah, I'm gonna have to look into this tabletop RPG, because my husband and I are really into tabletop games. Let's see, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, that's like the one that everybody plays. And I really enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but we also play a lot of Seventh Continent, which is less of a role-playing game and more of a, like, strategy sort of adventure type game. Really interesting, very long, a big game. We've been playing a lot of Tales of the Arabian Nights as well. I don't know, I mean, not as much. We haven't been playing as many games since, you know, the pandemic and not being able to have other people over, and there's not very many games that you can play with just two, but we're making it work. Oh, very similar to Vampire the Masquerade, same system, different template. Honestly, I would really love to run it for you. Listen, if there's a lot of stuff that I've been wanting to do, like, on streams or with other creators, and, I mean, I'm a little wary because I know the challenges of running those kinds of things on a stream and, like, digitally. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely up for trying all of those things. There was something else that I wanted to play on stream if people would be interested. One Quiet Year is what it's called, and it's not even like a game, really. It's more of like a cooperative storytelling map making experience. Which makes it sound really boring. But basically the gist of it is, like, you tell the story of a civilization using drawings, like you're making a map of the civilization. And the way that you do it is you're given prompts by cards. Like, you draw cards, and they tell you, they, like, ask you questions about the civilization, and then you go around and answer them in a group, or in a circle. And it sounds very simple. It is pretty simple, but it's a lot of fun. And I just love those kinds of storytelling things. Because that's my favorite thing about RPGs, and especially tabletop RPGs and, like, Dungeons and Dragons, is getting to tell stories and just create things with my friends. So any other systems or any other games that allow me to do that, 100%, I'm into it. I will do it. So, I mean, I'm not promising anything, but I will definitely at least try to do it. So we will see. Yeah, just hit me up. We can plan something, we can figure something out, because I love those kinds of things. But let us read chapter 10. Not super long, doesn't look like, but We are nearing the end. After this, there are only 3 more chapters. We are getting to all of the very exciting bits. So much adrenaline. Whew. Okay. Chapter 10. Coraline walked up the stairs outside the building to the topmost flat, where, in her world, the crazy old man upstairs lived. She'd gone up there once with her real mother, when her mother was collecting for charity. They had stood in the open doorway, waiting for the crazy old man with the big mustache to find the envelope that Coraline's mother had left, and the flat had smelled of strange foods and pipe tobacco and odd, sharp, cheesy-smelling things Coraline could not name. She had not wanted to go any farther inside than that. "I'm an explorer," said Coraline out loud, but her words sounded muffled and dead on the misty air. She had made it out of the cellar, hadn't she? And she had, but if there was one thing that Coraline was certain of, it was that this flat would be worse. She reached the top of the house. The topmost flat had once been the attic of the house, but that was a long time ago. She knocked on the green-painted door. It swung open, and she walked in. "We have eyes and we have nerveses. We have tails and we have teeth. You'll all get what you deserveses when we rise from underneath," whispered a dozen or more tiny voices in that dark flat, with the roof so low where it met the walls that Coraline could almost reach up and touch it. Red eyes stared at her. Little pink feet scurried away as she came close. Darker shadows slipped through the shadows at the edges of things. It smelled much worse in here than in the real crazy old man upstairs' flat. That smelled of food, unpleasant food to Coraline's mind, but she knew that that was a matter of taste. She did not like spices, herbs, or exotic things. This place smelled as if all the exotic foods in the world had been left out to go rotten. "Little girl," said a rustling voice in the far room. "Yes," said Coraline. "I'm not frightened," she told herself. And as she thought it, she knew that it was true. There was nothing here that frightened her. These things, even the thing in the cellar, were illusions, things made by the other mother in a ghastly parody of the real people and real things on the other end of the corridor. She could not truly make anything, decided Coraline. She could only twist and copy and distort things that already existed. And then Coraline found herself wondering why the other mother would have placed a snow globe on the drawing room mantelpiece. For the mantelpiece, in Coraline's world, was quite bare. As soon as she had asked herself that question, she realized that there actually was an answer. Then the voice came again, and her train of thought was interrupted. "Come here, little girl. I know what you want, little girl." It was a rustling voice, scratchy and dry. It made Coraline think of some kind of enormous dead insect, which was silly, she knew. How could a dead thing, especially a dead insect, have a voice? She walked through several rooms with low, slanting ceilings until she came to the final room. It was a bedroom, and the other crazy old man upstairs sat at the far end of the room, in the near darkness, bundled up in his coat and hat. As Coraline entered, he began to talk. "Nothing's changed, little girl," he said, his voice sounding like the noise dry leaves make as they rustle across pavement. "And what if you do everything you swore you would? What then? Nothing's changed. You'll go home, you'll be bored, you'll be ignored. No one will listen to you, not really listen to you. You're too clever and too quiet for them to understand. They don't even get your name right. Stay here with us," said the voice from the far figure at the end of the room. "We will listen to you and play with you and laugh with you. The other mother will build whole worlds for you to explore and tear them down every night when you're done. Every day will be better and brighter than the one that went before. Remember the toy box? How much better would a world be built just like that, all for you? And there will be gray, wet days where I just don't know what to do, and there's nothing to read or to watch, and nowhere to go, and the day drags on forever?" asked Coraline. From the shadows, the man said, "Never." "And will there be awful meals, with food made from recipes with garlic and tarragon and broad beans in?" asked Coraline. "Every meal will be a thing of joy," said the voice from under the old man's hat. "Nothing will pass your lips that does not entirely delight you." And could I have day-glow green gloves to wear, and yellow Wellington boots in the shapes of frogs? Asked Coraline. Frogs, ducks, rhinos, octopuses, whatever you desire, the world will be built new for you every morning. If you stay here, you can have whatever you want. Coraline sighed. You really don't understand, do you? She said. I don't want whatever I want. Nobody does, not really. What kind of fun would it be if I just got everything I ever wanted, just like that, and it didn't mean anything? What then? I don't understand, said the voice. Of course you don't understand, she said, raising the stone with a hole in it to her eye. You're just a bad copy that she made of the crazy old man upstairs. Not even that anymore, said the dead, whispery voice. There was a glow coming from the raincoat of the man at about chest height. Through the hole in the stone, the glow twinkled and shone blue-white as any star. She wished she had a stick or something to poke him with. She had no wish to get any closer to the shadowy man at the end of the room. Coraline took a step closer to the man, and he fell apart. Black rats leapt from the sleeves and from under the coat and hat, a score or more of them, red eyes shining in the dark. They chittered and they fled. The coat fluttered and fell heavily to the floor. The hat rolled into one corner of the room. Coraline reached out one hand and pulled the coat open. It was empty, although it was greasy to the touch. There was no sign of the final glass marble in it. She scanned the room, squinting through the hole in the stone, and caught sight of something that twinkled and burned like a star at floor level by the doorway. It was being carried in the forepaws of the largest black rat, and as she looked, it slipped away. The other rats watched her from the corners of the room as she ran after it. Now, rats can run faster than people, especially over short distances, but a large black rat holding a marble in its two front paws is no match for a determined girl, even if she is small for her age, moving at a run. Smaller black rats ran back and forth across her path, trying to distract her, but she ignored them all, keeping her eyes focused on the one with the marble, who was heading straight out of the flat toward the front door. They reached the steps on the outside of the building. Coraline had time to observe that the house itself was continuing to change, becoming less distinct and flattening out, even as she raced down the stairs. It reminded her of a photograph of a house now, not the thing itself. Then she was simply racing pell-mell down the steps in pursuit of the rat, with no room in her mind for anything else, certain she was gaining on it. She was running fast, too fast, she discovered, as she came to the bottom of one of the flights of stairs, and her foot skidded and twisted, and she went crashing onto the concrete landing. Her left knee was scraped and skinned. In the palm of one hand she had thrown out to stop herself was a mess of scraped skin and grit. It hurt a little, and it would, she knew, soon hurt much more. She picked the grit out of her palm and climbed to her feet, and, as fast as she could, knowing that she had lost and it was already too late, she went down to the final landing at the ground level. She looked around for the rat, but it was gone, and the marble along with it. Her hand stung where the skin had been scraped, and there was blood trickling down her ripped pajama leg from her knee. It was as bad as the summer that her mother had taken the training wheels off Coraline's bicycle. But then, back then, in with all the cuts and scrapes, her knees had scabs on top of scabs, she had had a feeling of achievement. She was learning something, doing something she had not known how to do. Now she felt nothing but cold loss. She had failed the ghost children. She had failed her parents. She had failed herself, failed at everything. She closed her eyes and wished that the earth would swallow her up. There was a cough. She opened her eyes and saw the rat. It was lying on the brick path at the bottom of the stairs, with a surprised look on its face, which was now several inches away from the rest of it. Its whiskers were stiff, its eyes were wide open, its teeth visible and yellow and sharp. A collar of wet blood glistened at its neck. Beside the decapitated rat, a smug expression on its face, was the black cat. It rested one paw on the gray glass marble. "I think I once mentioned," said the cat, "that I don't like rats at the best of times. It looked like you needed this one, however. I hope you don't mind my getting involved." "I think," said Coraline, trying to catch her breath, "I think you may have said something of the sort." The cat lifted its paw from the marble, which rolled toward Coraline. She picked it up. In her mind, a final voice whispered to her, urgently. She has lied to you. She will never give you up now she has you. She will no more give any of us up than change her nature. The hairs on the back of Coraline's neck prickled, and Coraline knew that the girl's voice told the truth. She put the marble in her dressing gown pocket with the others. She had all 3 marbles now. All she needed to do was find her parents. And Coraline realized with surprise that bit was easy. She knew exactly where her parents were. If she had stopped to think, she might have known where they were all along. The other mother could not create. She could only transform and twist and change. The mantelpiece in the drawing room back home was quite empty, but knowing that, she knew something else as well. The other mother, she plans to break her promise. She won't let us go, said Coraline. I wouldn't put it past her, admitted the cat. Like I said, there's no guarantee she'll play fair. And then he raised his head. Hello. Did you see that? What? Look behind you, said the cat. The house had flattened out even more. It no longer looked like a photograph, more like a drawing, a crude charcoal scribble of a house drawn on gray paper. Whatever's happening, Coraline said, thank you for helping with the rat. I suppose I'm almost there, aren't I? So you go off into the mist or wherever you go, and I hope I get to see you at home, if she lets me go home. The cat's fur was on end, and its tail was bristling like a chimney sweep's brush. What's wrong? Asked Coraline. They've gone, said the cat. They just aren't there anymore. The ways in and out of this place, they just went flat. Is that bad? The cat lowered its tail, swishing it from side to side angrily. It made a low growling noise in the back of its throat. It walked in a circle until it was facing away from Coraline, and then it began to walk backwards, stiffly, one step at a time, until it was pushing up against Coraline's leg. She put down a hand to stroke it, and could feel how hard its heart was beating. It was trembling like a dead leaf in a storm. You'll be fine, said Coraline. Everything's going to be fine. I'll take you home. The cat said nothing. Come on, cat, said Coraline. She took a step back toward the steps, but the cat stayed where it was, looking miserable and, oddly, much smaller. If the only way out is past her, said Coraline, then that's the way we're going to go. She went back to the cat, bent down and picked it up. The cat did not resist. It simply trembled. She supported its bottom with one hand, rested its front legs on her shoulders. The cat was heavy, but it was not too heavy to carry. It licked at the palm of her hand where the blood from the scrape was welling up. Coraline walked up the stairs one step at a time, heading back into her own flat. She was aware of the marbles clicking in her pocket, aware of the stone with the hole in it, aware of the cat pressing itself against her. She got to her front door, now just a small child's scrawl of a door, and she pushed her hand against it, half expecting that her hand would rip through it, revealing nothing behind it but blackness and a scattering of stars. But the door swung open, and Coraline went through. And that is where we will end tonight. What a couple of chapters. That was like exhausting to read through. So much just high octane action. Hollywood could never. If we could get Izzy and Scott and Rosa, that would be amazing. Yes. Yes, get the whole ITU crew on this. I will join in a heartbeat and it will be incredible. I am into it. Morningstar says, I realized that my tabletop collection has predominantly spooky vibes. Betrayal of House on the Hill, Arkham Horror, and my next big purchase is The Fury of Dracula. I have not heard of The Fury of Dracula, but I'm into it. I have played Betrayal of House on the Hill. I really liked it, except everybody that we were playing with, except like 2 of us, had never played it before, and they were like really struggling with the rules, so it wasn't super great, but I still had fun because it is a fun game. Arkham Horror, I have played Arkham Horror. So the thing that I don't really like about games based on the Lovecraft mythos is that they make the great old ones and the elder things and, you know, the deep ones and all of that mythos, they make it too real and knowable. Like, you can kill Azathoth. Like, that, when I played, the one time that I played Arkham Horror, we killed Azathoth. Like, it was me with my Tommy gun just shooting him, and he died and we won, and it was like we won. But I don't know, I very much like the unknowableness of that kind of horror, and the fact that it is so outside of anything that we can comprehend, that it's like, that's what it's supposed to be, outside of our reality, and what our minds are capable of understanding. And I think that a lot of games make it too down to earth and too real. But then on the other hand, I mean, you do have like Mountains of Madness, the game, which I liked, because it was more about that, like, building tension and the fear and the unknown. It wasn't necessarily like you have to fight this great old one and beat him in order to, you know, get your treasure and get out. So I like that. But the games where you have to, that like make enemies out of these things, just feel like, I understand why people find them fun, and they are fun. They just feel like a betrayal of the element, the essence of those creatures, I guess. Poor Coraline, you've internalized capitalist just world philosophy so young. Listen, she's like an 11-year-old girl. I'm sure when we were all 11, we had internalized a lot of things, alright? I'm sure when she gets older and she, you know, meets people from outside of her comfort zone and you know, the little British town that she's grown up in, she'll be more wise. Trying to fight Cthulhu with a shotgun did not go well for my group. It wouldn't go well if you tried that in real life, probably as well either. So losing that game is actually more realistic. So losing it is actually winning. That's my hot take. Yes, guns defeat existential horror. Yeah, a lot of action games focus on player empowerment, and horror is about disempowerment, which is a hard sell for a lot of players. Yeah, so I recently, oops, I just disappeared chat. I recently watched a video essay on Lovecraftian video games, and it was like in search of good Lovecraftian video games. In fact, let me see if I can find it and post it in chat so you all can grab it. And one thing that was really interesting and that I really liked about this video essay, because it is a little on the longer side, was that the person, Never Knows Best is the name of the channel. They talk about what makes something Lovecraftian, and that it's not just, you know, things with... Can I really not type in chat on my phone? We'll see, we'll get there. But that it's not just, you know, things with tentacles or, you know, 1920s and 1930s New England. Like, it's not just the vibes, but it's not just the, like, aesthetic, but it's also the vibes and the sort of psychological element of it. And let's see. Oh, I'm watching myself on my phone. That's freaky. Alright, let me send this in the chat. Just send the link. This is weird. Oh, that I'm seeing myself do this, but like set off by a couple seconds. Anyway. And so basically the gist of this video is that he goes through a lot of things that people think of, video games that people think of as Lovecraftian, especially the ones that are based on actual like Lovecraft stories, like Call of Cthulhu, the video game, obviously. And he talks about which ones work, which ones don't, and the fact that most of the ones that sell themselves as explicitly Lovecraftian don't work. Because they think that all that you need to be Lovecraftian is the monsters and, you know, some sort of like 1920s detective, like, you know, film noir sort of style. And they rest on those things. Like they, you know, think that they don't need to do anything else outside of having those elements, and so they fail as Lovecraftian games. But there were a couple of games that he brought up that do have the Lovecraftian themes without necessarily having the aesthetic. And one of them, the only one that I remember off the top of my head, is Sunless Seas, which I did immediately go buy on Steam right after watching that video. I haven't actually played it yet. I've been meaning to play it, but I moved in between now and then, so maybe that's something that I'll play this month for Halloween stuff. But Sunless Seas is Lovecraftian, this person argues, because it has those themes of knowledge and constantly seeking knowledge, and also it's very weird. Like, it has almost like a magical realism aspect to it, where there's just this like weird fantasy stuff that happens, and things that are just shouldn't exist, and that are kind of unknowable. And it does have that kind of dark ambiance to it. So it's eerie, but it's not necessarily like scary. And I think that there were a few others that he mentioned, but I don't remember off the top of my head because it has been a couple months since I watched it. But I do really recommend it if you're into that kind of literature or those kinds of games. And he does talk specifically just about video games. I don't think that he talks about tabletop RPGs or anything like that, because it is just like in search of Lovecraftian video games. But if you're into those kinds of things... Oh, another one he mentioned is Darkest Dungeons. That's similar. It has some of those vibes without selling itself as being Lovecraftian. I started that game because I really like those kinds of games. Those like turn-based sort of strategy kind of games. But I think I was like in grad school when I started playing it, and I couldn't spend a ton of time on it, and it's a hard game, so I sort of fell off of it. But yeah, that is my recommendation of the stream, is that video. Sunless Sea is better than Sunless Skies. I got both because I think there was like a deal. If you got both, it was like a bundle thing. So I will definitely... Sunless Sea is definitely like higher priority for me than Sunless Skies. It was just like, oh, I might as well get both. But Sunless Sea, OMG, yes. Alright, sounds very much like we have that I need to definitely be playing that game now. Because I also need to play Disco Elysium too, which I haven't, and I've been meaning to, and it's like, I almost feel guilty for not having played it because I've heard it's so good. And I really want to play it, especially now that the like definitive edition has come out with the voice acting and everything. Ugh. Yeah, I know. I need. Listen, I'm very busy. I have a very important job making YouTube videos. Don't you understand? No, but there is a lot of stuff that I'm working on, and like some collaborations and things that are coming down the pipeline. But that being said, I did get this one huge video that I've been working on finished, and it will be out sometime in the next week or two. So maybe I will have time to do video games. Yeah, Disco Elysium has sat downloaded and unplayed for like a month because I've been waiting for the right headspace to play it. That too. Like, I feel like over the summer I was like, I moved and it was fun and busy, and like I was busy doing other things and my brain felt busy. But now things are a little more chill. I'm a little more relaxed. I think I can maybe get into that kind of detective headspace. So soon, hopefully. But yes, sometimes you want to play games, but also you don't. Yeah. But recently, I actually have these here. I've been getting more into like crafting. I'm not very good at crafty things. I don't have a lot of artistic ability, but I do this thing called punch needling, which is basically, it's like if you took cross stitch and made it like 10 times simpler. But I've been doing a little bit, like I have this, oh, the color is not great. You can't see all the like rainbow colors, but it's like a rainbow. I mean, it's very simple, but I'm also working on this one, which is a pumpkin, or it will be a pumpkin, but I realized after I had done the yellow that I didn't have any orange, and I was out of orange yarn, so I now just have this sort of like shading done, but I don't have any of the actual like pumpkin flesh finished yet. And I don't have any good greens, like there's a leaf that's gonna go here and some vines, but none of it can be completed yet. But that's what I've been doing to relax now that I have this video out of the way, and sent off to the editor to actually turn my rambling out of camera into something that's actually worth watching. But your pumpkin has no flesh. It has been defleshed. Oh, why is it called punch needling? Good question. Give me a moment. So, yarn, needles. And the way that it works is you take the needle, you put some yarn in it. I'm not actually going to do it, but I'll lazy thread it. You put it in the needle like this, and then you take your thing and you just punch the needle into it and bring it, I realize you can't see that, and just bring it back out. And because of the way that it's threaded into the needle, when it punches, it leaves a loop, and then the fabric like closes back up when you pull the needle out, and it makes it like taut again, and so it holds that loop in place, and then you can just do it over and over and over and over again. So it's just like punch, 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 and it just leaves all of these little loops, which I realize you probably cannot see that these are loops, but they are. And so it leaves these loops, and so it has a really nice like soft kind of texture to it. But that's why it's called punch needling, because you're literally just punching a needle into, you know, Aida or monk's cloth or whatever material you want to use. Because I used to do cross stitching, but cross stitching requires much more like precision, and the thing that I don't like about more traditional forms of embroidery is that it has to be precise, and it's the like threading and like having to pay attention to the back of it and the front of it. Like it's too much. It's too much. And so punch needling is very simple. You really just pay attention to the front of it. or the back of it, because usually the back is where you can like draw your pattern if you have one, and then follow it, and then it's just out on the front, and you don't have to worry about, you know, tying things off, or and a lot of the time you're dealing with yarn or like full strands of thread. Now this is getting into like embroidery talk, which I know is probably very boring, but thread comes in like thick strands, basically, where there are like 6 strands of yarn in one, or of thread rather, in a single thing. So like this, you have this thing of yarn, but it's actually broken up thread, not yarn, but it's actually broken up into like 6 individual strands. And a lot of the time when you're doing embroidery, you want to take all of these strands and just work with them individually. And so you have to like de-strand all of your thread, and it's awful, and I hate it. But with punch needling, even with the thinner needles, like this one, you can work with whole things of thread, which is nice, because then you don't have to worry about, you know, de-stranding it. Basically, I like punch needling because it's a lot less tedious. Because I think that's the reason why I'm not very good at crafting, is because there's a lot of like impatience and frustration that comes with the tedium that a lot of other crafts require. And so if I can just like go from having an idea or having a picture in my head to having a rough outline of it, and even some of it filled in within like an hour or 2 of work, that's perfect for me. So it's like a happy medium where you can't have as much detail in punch needling as you can have in traditional embroidery, but it's a lot quicker and a lot less tedious. Yeah, the hollowness and hint of tentacles throughout the parts of the basic structure and shading are already done. Sounds like doing pixel art. It is a lot like pixel art, yeah. Messes with thread strands is a recipe for getting things tangled. Oh, that's the worst. That is the worst thing about dealing with thread, is it getting tangled. Yeah, it sucks. So that's why I like yarn and not having to deal with unstranding my thread. I don't even know if that's the right word, but no, my mom was really good at cross stitching. I mean, she still is, I think. But like growing up, we had a lot of cross stitch art in the house because that's what she would do. Like that was the craft that she did. And so I always grew up like wanting to cross stitch and trying cross stitching, but it was always so slow and tedious, and if you mess up, it sucks, and it's really hard to undo a lot of the things. And like, I just don't have the brain to do that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. Found object collages utilizing old leaves and twigs and such might be your kind of thing in terms of finicky effort. Honestly, that's not a bad idea. I haven't like done that kind of art before, but I do like collecting a lot of that kind of stuff. And I like the idea of like pressing flowers, but that takes a really long time because you have to actually like wait for the flowers to dry and get pressed. But yeah, no, that's a good idea. I might look into doing that kind of art stuff. My husband does knitting. That's actually why we have a lot of this yarn, is because he knits. He actually, when he was in, I don't remember if it was in high school or college, but he knit himself a full-size replica of the Fourth Doctor's scarf from Doctor Who. Like, full, something like 11 feet or something like that. Like, incredibly long, all the same colors. Like, he actually went, did all the research, found exactly the right colors of yarn, and knit himself. I mean, it took him a long time, and you can even tell from the beginning of the scarf to the end of the scarf, you can see his progression in terms of, like, you know, there are a couple little mistakes and a couple little, you know, bits at the beginning, but then by the end it's like a pro. So, like, that's cute. I hope BBC didn't copy strike him. Are they bad about that? I mean, I know they wouldn't actually, and that's a joke, but I don't know how the BBC run things over there. But yeah, he, I don't know. It's like knitting and crocheting. I don't know why I never tried those. I think they just didn't necessarily appeal to me. Because you don't make, it's like harder to do like art that you like display with those kinds of methods. It's more about like wearing things and making, you know, accessories. But no, I mean, I like, there's a lot of cool types of yarn. I mean, like we were talking about with duct tape earlier, you know, there's really cool yarn like this, you know, multicolored, and it's incredibly soft. I don't know what it's made out of. It doesn't say. I mean, I'm sure it does say, but medium. It is size 4 yarn. I can't find it. It doesn't matter. It's very soft. But yeah, when I started looking into like working with yarn, I had to learn what all the different weights were and what like worsted yarn means. There's a whole language, and it was a little overwhelming, but wearing is displaying on a human body. That is true. Oh, good night, Escatonic. Thank you for being here. Yeah, poke me about the RPG stuff. We can work something out. Yeah. Let's see. Morningstar says they are pretty bad about that. Very protective of their IP. Wonderful. Well, then don't tell them that he got into Doctor Who specifically by not necessarily watching it while it was on broadcasted television. If you know what I mean. Alright. Well, what time is it? Almost 9 o'clock. That is way past my bedtime. I am like secretly an old woman who goes to bed usually around 9 o'clock. So, yeah, looks like everybody's going to sleep. I forgot the word sleep, which means that it is time for me to sleep. So thank you all for hanging out. Going through some wild chapters, really high adrenaline chapters, and I'm glad we got to decompress after and talk about art and crafts and all of those things that help us relax. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. Tomorrow night we will have our thrilling and epic conclusion to the book. I hope to see you all there. But until then, stay safe and stay warm. And I will see y'all again soon, I hope. Bye, folks.